Girl, sit down and grab your coffee because I'm about to spill some tea that'll have you questioning everything about family dynamics. We're talking jealousy, betrayal, forgiveness, and plot twists that would make your favorite Netflix series look basic. This is the story of Joseph and that famous coat of many colors. And honey, it is messy with a capital M. Okay, so picture this. We've got Jacob, who's got 12 sons. 12! Can you imagine the chaos in that household? The laundry alone would drive me insane. But out of all these boys, there's one who's clearly daddy's favorite, and his name is Joseph. Now, Jacob doesn't even try to hide it. This man is out here playing favorites like it's nobody's business. Joseph is 17, practically a baby compared to his older brothers, and Jacob is just obsessed with this kid. Maybe it's because Joseph was born when Jacob was older, or maybe because his mama Rachel was Jacob's true love, who died way too young. Either way, Jacob looks at Joseph and sees nothing but perfection. And then, oh girl, and then Jacob decides to make Joseph this absolutely gorgeous coat. Not just any coat, mind you, but a coat of many colors. We're talking about a rainbow masterpiece that probably took months to make. Think custom designer piece that screams, "I'm the favorite child," from a mile away. When Joseph puts on that coat, he's literally glowing with pride. Can you imagine how that felt? Your dad loving you so much that he creates his one-of-a-kind piece just for you? But honey, if you think this story is all sunshine and rainbows, you've got another thing coming. The older brothers are watching all this go down, and their faces? Pure fury. They're seeing red, and I don't just mean the red in Joseph's coat. These grown men are watching their baby brother get treated like royalty while they're out here doing all the hard work with the sheep and cattle. The resentment is building up like a pressure cooker about to explode. But wait. It gets worse, because Joseph isn't content with just being the favorite. This boy starts having dreams, and not just any dreams, prophetic dreams that basically predict his family will bow down to him one day. And does Joseph keep these dreams to himself like any smart person would? Oh no, honey. Picture this scene. The whole family is sitting around, probably having breakfast, and Joseph just casually drops his bombshell. He's like, "Hey everyone, I had this crazy dream last night. We were all in the field binding sheaves of grain, and my sheaf stood up straight while all of yours bowed down to mine." The audacity. The brothers are already heated about the coat situation, and now this teenage boy is basically saying he's gonna rule over them? Their jaws probably hit the floor. Even Jacob had to be like, "Son, maybe keep these dreams to yourself next time." But Joseph isn't done. He has another dream where the sun, moon, and 11 stars bow down to him. When he shares this one, even Jacob is shook because he realizes the sun and moon represent him and his wife, meaning Joseph is dreaming about his parents bowing to him too. Girl, before I spill this next part about what the brothers do next, make sure you've hit that subscribe button because you don't want to miss this tea. This story is about to take a turn that'll have you shook. The brothers are beyond done at this point. They can't even stand to be around Joseph. Every time they see that colorful coat swishing around, every time he opens his mouth about another dream, their hatred grows stronger. They literally cannot speak peacefully to him anymore. The family dynamic is toxic. One day, Jacob sends Joseph to check on his brothers who were out in the fields with the flocks near Shechem. Now, Joseph could have just thrown on some regular clothes for this trip, but what does he do? He puts on the coat. Honey, he's walking into a lion's den wearing a target on his back. Joseph gets to Shechem, but plot twist, his brothers aren't there. A random man finds him wandering around looking lost and tells him the brothers moved on to Dothan. So Joseph, being the dutiful son, continues his journey to find them. Meanwhile, the brothers spot him coming from way off in the distance. How do they know it's Joseph? That coat is like a neon sign. One of them probably squints and goes, "Is that?" Yep, that's our little brother in his fancy coat. And what happens next is where this story gets dark, ladies. The brothers look at each other and you can practically see the evil plan forming in their minds. One of them, probably the ringleader, says those chilling words, Here comes that dreamer. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these pits, and we'll say a fierce animal devoured him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. Kill him! Their own baby brother? The jealousy has reached a point where they're literally planning murder. Can you imagine being so consumed by hatred that you want to end your sibling's life? This is beyond sibling rivalry. This is pure evil. But thank God for Reuben. He's the oldest brother, and even though he's angry too, he has enough sense to know that murder is crossing a line they can never come back from. Reuben speaks up and says, no, we're not shedding blood. Let's just throw him in this pit, here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. Now, the text doesn't tell us what Reuben was really thinking, but I bet he was planning to come back later and rescue Joseph when the others cooled down. He's trying to buy time and save his brother's life without directly confronting the mob mentality that's taken over. So when Joseph finally reaches them, probably all excited to see his brothers and deliver their father's message, they don't even let him speak. They grab him, rip that beautiful coat right off his back, the coat that represents everything they hate about their family situation, and they throw him into an empty pit. Can you imagine Joseph's confusion and terror? One minute he's walking up to greet his brothers, the next minute he's at the bottom of a pit, probably scraped up and bruised, calling up to them asking what's going on. And they just sit down and eat their meal. Like throwing your brother in a pit is no big deal. The coldness is chilling. They're eating lunch while their brother is trapped below them, probably crying and begging to be let out. This is sociopathic behavior, and it shows just how far jealousy can push people when it's left unchecked. Then, because apparently this day can get even more dramatic, a caravan of Ishmaelite traders comes by, heading to Egypt with spices, balm, and myrrh, and Judah, another one of the older brothers, has what he thinks is a brilliant idea. What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he's our brother, our own flesh and blood. Now, on one hand, you might think Judah is being merciful by suggesting they sell Joseph instead of killing him, but let's be real. Selling your brother into slavery is still horrible. They're literally treating him like property, like he's worth nothing more than the money they can get for him. The brothers agree to this plan, and when the traders come by, they pull Joseph out of the pit. Imagine his relief. He probably thinks they've come to their senses and are letting him go home. But instead, they hand him over to complete strangers for 20 pieces of silver. 20 pieces of silver! That's what they decided their brother's life was worth. Joseph must have been in absolute shock. The betrayal, the realization that his own flesh and blood cared so little about him that they'd sell them like livestock, it must have been devastating. He's probably crying, begging, pleading with them not to do this, but their hearts have been hardened by years of resentment. By the way, drop me a comment if you'd have reacted differently in this situation, because, whew, I know I would have. This level of family dysfunction is beyond anything most of us can imagine. After the traders take Joseph away, probably with him looking back at his brothers in disbelief until they disappear from view, the brothers have to figure out what they're going to tell their father. They can't exactly say, oh yeah, Dad, we sold Joseph into slavery because we got tired of him being your favorite. So they come up with an elaborate lie. They take that beautiful coat, the symbol of their father's love that they've resented for so long, and they dip it in goat's blood. Can you imagine the satisfaction they felt finally destroying that coat that represented everything they hated about their family dynamic? When they bring the bloody coat to Jacob, they don't directly say Joseph is dead. They're sneaky about it. They just present the evidence and let their father draw his own conclusions. We found this, they say. Do you recognize it? Is this your son's robe or not? Jacob takes one look at that blood-soaked coat and completely falls apart. It is my son's robe, he cries. A ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn into pieces. The poor man is devastated. He tears his clothes, puts on sackcloth, and mourns for his son for days. All his children try to comfort him, but Jacob refuses to be comforted. He says he'll go to his grave mourning for Joseph. And the brothers? They have to stand there and watch their father's heart break, knowing they're the cause of all this pain. They have to participate in comforting him while hiding the truth about what they've done. Talk about living with guilt. Meanwhile, Joseph is in Egypt, sold to a man named Potiphar, who's an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. Can you imagine what's going through Joseph's mind during this transition? He's gone from being his father's beloved son to a slave in a foreign country where he doesn't even speak the language fluently. But here's where we see Joseph's character start to shine. Instead of becoming bitter or giving up, he decides to make the best of his situation. The Bible tells us that the Lord was with Joseph, and because of this, he prospered, even as a slave. Joseph works so hard and shows so much integrity that Potiphar notices him. This young Hebrew slave is different from the others. He's honest, hardworking, and everything he touches seems to succeed. So, Potiphar starts giving Joseph more and more responsibility, until eventually, Joseph is running the entire household. Think about that progression. From the bottom of a pit to the head of an Egyptian official's house. Joseph is showing resilience and faith that would make anyone proud. He's not letting his circumstances define him or destroy his character. But just when things are looking up for Joseph, drama strikes again. Potiphar's wife notices how handsome and well-built Joseph is, and she starts trying to seduce him. Day after day, she's throwing herself at this young man, trying to get him to sleep with her. And Joseph? He consistently says no. He tells her, "My master has entrusted everything he owns to me. He doesn't even keep track of what's in his house because he trusts me completely. How could I betray that trust and sin against God?" Girl, the integrity. In a culture where slaves had no rights and could easily be taken advantage of, Joseph chooses to do what's right even when it would be so easy to give in. He's thinking about honor, loyalty, and his relationship with God rather than just satisfying immediate desires. But this woman is persistent and entitled. When Joseph continues to refuse her advances, she gets angry. And you know what they say about a woman scorned. One day when they're alone in the house, she grabs Joseph's cloak and tries to force herself on him. Joseph literally runs away, leaving his cloak in her hands. So what does she do? She lies. She calls the other servants and tells them that Joseph tried to assault her. Then, when her husband comes home, she tells him the same story, using Joseph's cloak as evidence. The injustice is infuriating. Here's Joseph trying to do the right thing, and he gets punished for it. Potiphar is so angry, he has Joseph thrown into prison immediately. No trial, no investigation, just straight to jail. Quick pause. Did you like this story already? Go on, tap that like button, and let's keep rolling because this plot is about to get even more incredible. Joseph is now in prison, probably thinking his life couldn't get any worse. He's been betrayed by his family, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and now he's locked up with no hope of appeal. But God hasn't forgotten about Joseph. Even in prison, Joseph's character shines through. The prison warden notices that there's something special about this young Hebrew man. Joseph shows leadership, kindness, and wisdom even in the worst circumstances. Soon, the warden puts Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners. Can you see the pattern here? No matter where Joseph goes or how bad his situation gets, his integrity and work ethic cause him to rise to positions of leadership. He's not just surviving, he's thriving even in the worst conditions. While Joseph is in prison, two of Pharaoh's officials, his chief cupbearer and chief baker, get thrown in jail too. One night, both men have strange dreams that trouble them deeply. When Joseph sees how distressed they are, he asks, "What's wrong?" They explain their dreams, saying they wish they had someone to interpret them. And Joseph, remember, he's the original dreamer himself, says, "Don't interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." The cupbearer goes first, describing a dream about a vine with 3 branches that budded, blossomed, and produced grapes. In the dream, he squeezed the grapes into Pharaoh's cup and gave it to him. Joseph tells him, the 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position. You'll be placing Pharaoh's cup in his hand just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. Then, Joseph adds something that shows his hope for freedom. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon. The baker, encouraged by the positive interpretation, shares his dream too. But Joseph's interpretation for him is devastating. In 3 days, Pharaoh will hang him. Talk about being the bearer of bad news. 3 days later, on Pharaoh's birthday, both interpretations come true exactly as Joseph predicted. The cupbearer is restored to his position, but the baker is executed. You'd think the cupbearer would remember Joseph's kindness and help, right? Wrong. He completely forgets about Joseph for 2 whole years. 2 years later, 2 years of Joseph waiting and wondering if he had been forgotten forever, Pharaoh starts having troubling dreams. In the first dream, he's standing by the Nile River when 7 healthy, fat cows come up and graze in the meadow. Then 7 sickly, thin cows come up and eat the healthy ones, but they remain just as thin as before. Pharaoh wakes up disturbed, falls back asleep, and has another dream. This time he sees 7 healthy, full heads of grain growing on a single stalk. Then 7 thin, scorched heads of grain swallow up the healthy ones. These dreams trouble Pharaoh so much that he calls for all the magicians and wise men in Egypt to interpret them, but none of them can give him a satisfactory explanation. The most powerful man in Egypt is losing sleep over dreams that nobody can understand. Finally, the cupbearer remembers Joseph. He tells Pharaoh about the young Hebrew in prison who accurately interpreted his and the baker's dreams 2 years ago. Pharaoh immediately sends for Joseph, who gets cleaned up and brought before the most powerful ruler in the world. Can you imagine Joseph's emotions in this moment? He's been in prison for years, probably thinking God had forgotten about him, and suddenly he's standing before Pharaoh. This is either his moment of deliverance or potential disaster if he says the wrong thing. Pharaoh tells Joseph about his dreams, and Joseph responds with something that shows his spiritual maturity. I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. Even in this crucial moment, Joseph gives credit to God rather than taking it for himself. He's learned through all his trials that God is the source of wisdom and success, not his own abilities. Joseph listens to both dreams and then delivers an interpretation that's both shocking and practical. Both dreams mean the same thing, he explains. God is showing Pharaoh what he's about to do. The 7 good cows and 7 good heads of grain represent 7 years of great abundance throughout Egypt. The 7 thin cows and scorched grain represent 7 years of famine that will follow. But Joseph doesn't stop there. He gives practical advice too. He suggests that Pharaoh appoint someone wise to oversee storing up grain during the 7 good years, so Egypt will survive the 7 years of famine. He recommends collecting 1/5 of all the harvest during the abundant years and storing it in cities under Pharaoh's authority. Pharaoh and all his officials are blown away. Not only has Joseph interpreted the dreams in a way that makes perfect sense, but he's provided a complete disaster management plan. Pharaoh looks at Joseph and says, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" And then, oh my goodness, girls, Pharaoh does something absolutely incredible. He doesn't just reward Joseph or set him free. He puts Joseph in charge of the entire country. He removes his signet ring and puts it on Joseph's finger, dresses him in fine linen, and puts a gold chain around his neck. Joseph goes from prison to the palace in one day. He becomes the second in command over all of Egypt, with only Pharaoh himself having more authority. They give him an Egyptian name, Zaphenath-Paneah, and arrange for him to marry Asenath, daughter of an Egyptian priest. Can you imagine the whiplash? Joseph wakes up as a forgotten prisoner and goes to bed as the prime minister of Egypt. God's timing is perfect, even when we can't see it in the moment. Joseph is 30 years old when he enters Pharaoh's service, 13 years after his brothers sold him into slavery. 13 years of slavery, false accusations, and imprisonment, but God was preparing him for this exact moment. During the 7 years of abundance, Joseph works tirelessly to implement the storage plan. He travels throughout Egypt, organizing the collection and storage of grain in quantities so large they stop trying to measure it. The Bible says it was like the sand of the sea, beyond counting. And just as Joseph predicted, after 7 years of abundance, the famine begins. But it's not just affecting Egypt, it's hitting all the surrounding countries too. People from everywhere start coming to Egypt to buy grain because Joseph's planning has made Egypt the only place with sufficient food stores. And guess who's among those people desperately needing food? Joseph's family back in Canaan. Jacob hears that there's grain available in Egypt and tells his sons, "Why do you just keep looking at each other? Go down to Egypt and buy some grain for us so that we may live and not die." But Jacob doesn't send Benjamin, Joseph's younger brother and his new favorite, since he believes Joseph is dead. Jacob is terrified of losing Benjamin too, so he keeps him home while the other 10 brothers make the journey to Egypt. Girl, the irony. The same brothers who sold Joseph into slavery are now coming to him for help, and they don't even know it. God's plans are always bigger than we can imagine. When the 10 brothers arrive in Egypt and come before Joseph to buy grain, they bow down to him with their faces to the ground, and suddenly, Joseph remembers his dreams from all those years ago. The dreams about his brothers bowing down to him are literally coming true before his eyes. Joseph recognizes his brothers immediately, but they don't recognize him at all. Why would they? The last time they saw Joseph was a 17-year-old Hebrew boy in a colorful coat. Now he's a 39-year-old Egyptian official dressed in fine linen with all the regalia of power. He's speaking Egyptian through an interpreter, and it's been over 20 years. Joseph has a choice in this moment. He could reveal himself immediately and have them all arrested for what they did to him. He could get his revenge then and there. But instead, he decides to test them to see if they've changed. He speaks harshly to them and accuses them of being spies. He says, "You have come to see where our land is unprotected." The brothers are terrified and insist they're not spies, just brothers who came to buy food. They tell him about their father and mention they had another brother who is no more. When they say this, Joseph must be fighting back tears. And sis, don't forget to hit that bell so you're here first when the next Bible tea drops, because this reunion is about to get emotional. Joseph decides to test whether his brothers have learned anything from their past actions. He tells them, "This is how I will test whether you're telling the truth. One of you will stay here in prison while the rest return home with grain. But you must bring your youngest brother back to prove your words are true." He puts them all in custody for 3 days, letting them sweat and worry. On the 3rd day, he modifies the test. Now only one will stay while the others return, but they still must bring Benjamin back. The brothers start talking amongst themselves in Hebrew, not knowing Joseph can understand every word. And what they say reveals they've been carrying guilt about Joseph all these years. "Surely we are being punished because of our brother," they say. "We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we would not listen. That's why this distress has come on us." Reuben, who had tried to save Joseph originally, adds, "Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now we must give an accounting for his blood." Joseph has to turn away because he's about to cry. His brothers do feel guilt and remorse for what they did. They've been carrying this burden for over 20 years, and now they think God is punishing them. He chooses Simeon to stay behind and has the rest bound before their eyes, then orders his servants to fill their sacks with grain and secretly put each man's money back in his sack, along with provisions for their journey. When the brothers stop for the night on their way home, one of them opens a sack to feed his donkey and discovers his money. "My silver has been returned," he tells the others. "Here it is in my sack." They're all terrified. In their minds, this makes them look like thieves. What if the Egyptians think they stole the grain? Their hearts sink and they turn to each other trembling, saying, "What is this that God has done to us?" When they get home to Jacob and tell him everything that happened, he's devastated. Not only is Simeon in prison in Egypt, but now they're saying they need to take Benjamin back with them to prove they're not spies. Jacob refuses. He says, "You have deprived me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and now you want to take Benjamin? Everything is against me." But as the famine continues and their food runs out, Jacob has no choice. When they've eaten all the grain they brought from Egypt, he tells them they have to go back and buy more food. Judah steps up and speaks with surprising maturity. "The man warned us solemnly that we wouldn't see his face again unless our brother was with us. If you'll send Benjamin along, we'll go down and buy food. But if you won't send him, we won't go, because the man said we wouldn't see his face unless our brother was with us." Finally, Jacob agrees to let Benjamin go, but not without taking precautions. He tells them to take some of the best products of the land as a gift: balm, honey, spices, myrrh, pistachio nuts, and almonds. He also tells them to take double the money, including the money that was returned in their sacks in case it was a mistake. Then Jacob does something that shows his spiritual growth. He prays. "May God Almighty grant you mercy before the man so that he will let your other brother and Benjamin come back with you. As for me, if I am bereaved, I am bereaved." When Joseph sees his brothers return with Benjamin, his heart must skip a beat. There's his baby brother, now a grown man. He immediately tells his steward to prepare a feast, because these men will eat with him at noon. The brothers are scared when they're brought to Joseph's house. They think they're in trouble because of the money that was put back in their sacks. They try to explain to the steward, but he reassures them, "It's all right. Don't be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, has given you treasure in your sacks. I received your silver." Then he brings out Simeon to them. The reunion between the brothers must have been emotional. They probably thought they'd never see him again. When Joseph comes home, the brothers present their gifts and bow down before him again, fulfilling those dreams once more. Joseph asks about their welfare and their aged father, and they respond that Jacob is still alive and well, bowing low to show respect. But when Joseph sees Benjamin, he can barely contain himself. "Is this your youngest brother, the one you told me about?" Then he says to Benjamin, "God be gracious to you, my son." Joseph is so overcome with emotion that he has to hurry out of the room to weep in private. Imagine seeing your baby brother after more than 20 years, knowing he doesn't recognize you, knowing he thinks you're dead. After he composes himself, Joseph returns and orders the meal to be served. He seats the brothers according to their birth order, from the oldest to the youngest, which amazes them because how could this Egyptian official possibly know their ages? Joseph sends them food from his table, but Benjamin receives 5 times as much as the others. They feast and drink freely with Joseph, probably thinking this powerful man has taken a special liking to them. But Joseph isn't done testing his brothers yet. He has one final, crucial test to see if they really changed. He tells his steward to fill their sacks with grain and put each man's money back in his sack. But then he adds a special instruction. "Put my cup, the silver one, in the mouth of the youngest one's sack, along with the silver for his grain." This is brilliant and heartbreaking at the same time. Joseph is setting up the exact same scenario that happened to him all those years ago. Benjamin is about to be taken away from his father, just like Joseph was. Will the brothers abandon their youngest brother to save themselves, or have they learned from their past mistakes? Early the next morning, the brothers are sent on their way, probably feeling relieved that everything went so well. But they haven't gone far when Joseph's steward catches up with them and accuses them of stealing his master's silver cup. The brothers are shocked and indignant. "Why does my lord say such things?" they protest. "We even brought back the money we found in our sacks. Why would we steal silver or gold from your master's house? If any of your servants is found to have it, he will die, and the rest of us will become your lord's slaves." The steward searches their sacks, starting with the oldest and working his way down to the youngest. Can you imagine the brothers' growing confidence as each search comes up empty? They probably think they're in the clear. But then, the cup is found in Benjamin's sack. The brothers are devastated. They tear their clothes in grief and despair, the same gesture their father made when he thought Joseph was dead. Back in Joseph's presence, the brothers throw themselves to the ground before him. Joseph says, "What is this you have done? Don't you know that a man like me can find things out by divination?" And then Judah, the same Judah who suggested selling Joseph into slavery all those years ago, steps forward and gives one of the most beautiful speeches in the entire Bible. He doesn't try to claim innocence or make excuses. Instead, he says, "What can we say to my Lord? What can we say? How can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered your servant's guilt. We are now your Lord's slaves, we ourselves and the one who was found to have the cup." But Joseph tests them further. "Only the man who was found to have the cup will become my slave. The rest of you, go back to your father in peace." This is it. This is the moment of truth. Will they abandon Benjamin just like they abandoned Joseph? Will they take this easy way out and go home to their father without their youngest brother? Judah's response shows just how much these men have changed. He pleads with Joseph, explaining that their father's life is bound up in the boy's life, that if Benjamin doesn't return, it will kill Jacob. Then Judah makes the ultimate sacrifice. "Now then, please let your servant remain here as your Lord's slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers." "How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? No, do not let me see the misery that would come on my father." Joseph can't control himself any longer. He orders all his attendants to leave the room, and then he breaks down completely. He weeps so loudly that the Egyptians hear him, and the report of it reaches Pharaoh's household. Through his tears, Joseph says those life-changing words, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" The brothers are terrified. They can't even answer him. They're face to face with the brother they betrayed, and he has the power to destroy them all. But Joseph, showing incredible grace and maturity, says, "Come closer to me." When they do, he says again, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you." Can you even? Joseph doesn't blame them or threaten revenge. Instead, he sees God's hand in everything that happened. He explains that the famine will last 5 more years, and God sent him to Egypt to preserve their family line. "So then it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household and ruler of all Egypt." The grace, the forgiveness, the spiritual maturity. Joseph has chosen to see his suffering as part of God's bigger plan, rather than focusing on his brother's betrayal. Joseph throws his arms around Benjamin and Benjamin weeps too. Then he kisses all his brothers and weeps over them. And after that, his brothers are finally able to talk with him. The news spreads throughout Pharaoh's palace. Joseph's brothers have come. Pharaoh and all his officials are pleased and tell Joseph to bring his entire family to Egypt, where they'll be given the best land and live off the fat of the land. Joseph sends his brothers home with carts, provisions, and gifts. To Benjamin, he gives 300 shekels of silver and 5 sets of clothes. To his father, he sends 10 donkeys loaded with the best things of Egypt and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain and bread and other provisions for the journey. As the brothers leave, Joseph warns them, "Don't quarrel on the way." He knows they're probably feeling guilty and might start blaming each other for everything that happened. When they arrive home and tell Jacob, Joseph is still alive. In fact, he is ruler of all Egypt. Jacob's heart nearly stops. He doesn't believe them at first. It's too good to be true. But when he sees the carts Joseph sent and hears everything Joseph said, his spirit revives. "I'm convinced," Jacob says. "My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." So, here we are at the end of this incredible story, and I hope you're as amazed as I am by how God works everything together for good. But before we wrap up, let's talk about the life lessons we can learn from Joseph's journey, because, honey, this story is packed with wisdom for our modern lives. First off, let's talk about dealing with family dysfunction. Joseph's story shows us that family relationships can be incredibly complex and painful. His brother's jealousy led to betrayal, lies, and years of separation. But here's the thing. Joseph didn't let their actions define his character or destroy his future. He kept his integrity even when it would have been easier to become bitter. In our own families, we might face favoritism, jealousy, or even betrayal. The lesson here is that we can't control how others treat us, but we can control how we respond. Joseph chose forgiveness over revenge, and that choice freed him to fulfill his destiny. Second, let's discuss resilience in the face of injustice. Joseph faced one unfair situation after another: betrayal by his brothers, false accusations by Potiphar's wife, forgotten by the cupbearer. But each time, instead of giving up, he chose to excel in whatever situation he found himself in. This applies so much to our lives today. We might face workplace injustice, false accusations, or people who forget to help us when they said they would. Joseph's example shows us that our response to these situations matters more than the situations themselves. When we maintain our character and work ethic regardless of circumstances, we position ourselves for eventual breakthrough. Third, let's examine the power of dreams and vision. Joseph's dreams as a young man seemed impossible and even offensive to his family. But God was showing him his destiny. Sometimes our dreams seem too big or face opposition from people who should support us. Joseph's story reminds us that God-given dreams don't have expiration dates. They might be delayed, but they're never canceled. Fourth, we need to talk about the incredible power of forgiveness. When Joseph finally revealed himself to his brothers, he could have had them executed or enslaved. Instead, he chose forgiveness and reconciliation. This wasn't just noble, it was strategic. His forgiveness allowed the entire family to heal and move forward together. In our relationships today, we often hold on to grudges that poison our own hearts more than they hurt the people who wronged us. Joseph shows us that forgiveness isn't about excusing bad behavior, it's about freeing ourselves to step into our destiny without carrying the weight of bitterness. Let's get real about how this story applies to our everyday lives, because the struggles Joseph faced aren't that different from what we deal with today. Career and workplace drama. How many of us have dealt with workplace favoritism, backstabbing colleagues, or false accusations? Joseph's response was to excel wherever he was placed, regardless of who got credit or how unfairly he was treated. In our careers, this means focusing on our own integrity and work ethic rather than getting caught up in office politics. Family relationships. Girl, family drama is real. Whether it's parents who play favorites, siblings who compete for attention, or relatives who spread lies about us, Joseph's story shows us that we can't control family dysfunction, but we can control our response to it. We can choose to be the person that breaks cycles of hurt instead of perpetuating them. Social media and public perception. Think about it. Joseph's coat of many colors was basically ancient social media flexing. His brothers saw him getting special treatment and recognition, and their jealousy consumed them. Today, we see people's highlight reels on Instagram and feel that same jealousy. Joseph's story reminds us that other people's blessings don't diminish our own and that our worth isn't determined by external recognition. Dating and relationships. Joseph's interaction with Potiphar's wife is the ultimate lesson in setting boundaries. He could have easily given in. Who would have known? But he understood that integrity in private moments determines our character in public ones. In our dating lives, this means having standards and sticking to them even when no one else would know. Financial struggles. Joseph went from wealth to slavery to prison to the palace. His financial situation changed dramatically multiple times, but his character remained consistent. This teaches us that our identity shouldn't be tied to our bank account and that financial setbacks don't define our future potential. Now, let's spill some tea about the forgiveness aspect, because this is where Joseph's story gets really revolutionary for our modern relationships. When Joseph forgave his brothers, he wasn't just being nice, he was being strategic about his own emotional health. Holding on to anger and resentment would have poisoned his ability to lead Egypt effectively and enjoy his reunion with his family. How many of us are walking around carrying grudges that are heavier than the people who hurt us? That friend who betrayed our trust, that ex who cheated, that family member who chose someone else's side during a conflict? We're often more hurt by our own refusal to forgive than they are. Joseph's forgiveness wasn't immediate either. He took time to process what happened and test his brother's character before fully reconciling. This shows us that forgiveness is a process, not a one-time event. We don't have to rush into reconciliation, but we do need to release the poison of bitterness for our own sake. The most beautiful part of Joseph's story is how God used every single setback as a set-up for his ultimate destiny. His brother's betrayal led him to being in Egypt right when Pharaoh needed a dream interpreter. His time as a slave taught him Egyptian culture and administration. His time in prison connected him with Pharaoh's officials. Every pain had a purpose. This is so relevant for us today when we're going through difficult seasons. That job you lost might be redirecting you to your dream career. That relationship that ended might be protecting you from settling for less than God's best. That family conflict might be teaching you boundaries and strengthening your character. Before I finish spilling all this tea, make sure you've smashed that like button if the story has touched your heart, and don't forget to subscribe because we've got so many more amazing Bible stories to explore together. Joseph's transformation from a spoiled teenager to a wise leader is the ultimate glow-up story. He learned humility, wisdom, leadership, and forgiveness through his trials. By the time he was reunited with his family, he wasn't the same person who had thoughtlessly shared his dreams and flaunted his special coat. This reminds us that our difficult seasons aren't punishments, they're preparation. God uses our trials to develop character qualities in us that we could never gain through easy times. Patience, perseverance, wisdom, empathy. These all come through walking through hard things and choosing to grow rather than become bitter. The most beautiful part of this entire story is how Joseph's forgiveness didn't just heal his relationship with his brothers, it preserved the entire lineage that would eventually produce Jesus. If Joseph had chosen revenge instead of reconciliation, the 12 tribes of Israel might never have survived the famine. This shows us that our choices to forgive and reconcile have impacts far beyond what we can see. When we choose grace over grudges, we're not just healing our own hearts, we're potentially impacting generations to come. Think about the family patterns you want to break or the legacies you want to leave. Joseph chose to be a cycle breaker, someone who stopped the pattern of jealousy and betrayal in his family line. We have the same opportunity in our own families and relationships. So what are the key takeaways from this incredible story that can transform how we approach our own life challenges? Trust the process. Even when life doesn't make sense, even when you're facing betrayal or injustice, trust that God is working everything together for your good. Joseph couldn't see the big picture during his years of slavery and imprisonment, but God was positioning him for his destiny all along. Character over comfort. Joseph consistently chose integrity over taking the easy way out. Whether it was refusing Potiphar's wife or choosing forgiveness over revenge, he prioritized character development over immediate gratification. Our character is the one thing no one can take from us, and it's what ultimately determines our destiny. Excellence in every season. Joseph didn't wait until he was in the palace to start excelling. He was excellent as a slave, excellent as a prisoner, and excellent as a ruler. Whatever season you're in right now, bloom where you're planted. Your current situation is preparing you for your next level. Forgiveness is freedom. Joseph's forgiveness of his brothers wasn't about excusing their behavior. It was about freeing himself to step fully into his purpose. When we hold on to unforgiveness, we're giving other people power over our present and future. Release them so you can be released. Dreams don't have expiration dates. It took over 20 years for Joseph's dreams to come to pass, but they did come to pass. Don't give up on the dreams God has placed in your heart, even if they seem delayed or impossible. God's timing is perfect, even when we can't understand it. As we wrap up this incredible story, I want you to think about how you can be a modern-day Joseph in your own sphere of influence. Maybe you're in a workplace where you can choose integrity over politics. Maybe you're in a family situation where you can choose forgiveness over grudges. Maybe you're facing false accusations where you can choose to trust God's vindication over defending yourself. The beauty of Joseph's story is that it shows us we don't have to be perfect to be used by God. We just have to be willing to grow through our circumstances rather than be destroyed by them. Joseph made mistakes as a young man, but he learned from them and became someone who could save entire nations. Your current struggles aren't the end of your story. They're preparing you for your moment of breakthrough. The brothers who betrayed you might one day need your help. The boss who falsely accused you might one day become your testimony. The family that rejected you might one day celebrate your success. But here's the key. You have to maintain your character and keep your heart right throughout the process. Bitterness will block your blessings, but grace will position you for greatness. Girl, if you've made it this far, you are committed to growth, and I am here for it. Joseph's story isn't just ancient history. It's a blueprint for how to navigate modern life with grace, wisdom, and faith. As you go forward from here, I want you to ask yourself, what area of my life needs more of Joseph's attitude? Where do I need to choose forgiveness over bitterness? Where do I need to excel in my current situation instead of waiting for better circumstances? Where do I need to trust God's process instead of trying to force my own timeline? Remember, every setback is a setup, every trial is preparation, and every test is developing character in you that you'll need for your destiny. You might be in your pit season right now, or your prison season, or your false accusation season, but your palace season is coming. And finally, before you go, make sure you're subscribed to this channel because we're going to continue exploring these incredible Bible stories that are packed with life-changing wisdom. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when we drop new content. And drop a comment below telling me which part of Joseph's story resonated most with you. Until next time, girl, keep growing, keep forgiving, and keep trusting that God is writing a beautiful story with your life, even when you can't see the ending yet. Love you, girl, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.